how much are we spending in marketing, how many users are we getting in, what's the sort of CAC to LTV. We did all those metrics, and a year later, the company was in some trouble, quite frankly. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be a musician.
Well,
what you want to be, and I think the passions you have are not single fold, right? You will be interested in several things during the course of your life, but I think at some point you have to choose to focus. Let's be honest, COVID has been beneficial for some companies. Not that it necessarily has been hugely advantageous for space, but it hasn't necessarily had the negative impact some would expect.
so yeah, I mean, as we were just staying downstairs, last time I probably saw you was in Portugal, where you had your booth for your newly developed company Space.
Mhm.
But I was thinking, let's take it before that, when I first met you, which was obviously when we were 17, 18 in Christ College.
In Christ College.
And then,
Indeed.
I mean, you were studying economics back then, wasn't it?
Economics, business studies, psychology.
Or what was your aim at that point in your life? How old were you back then? Like 20? I know you were a few years older than me.
Oh, no, I'm only 1 year old.
Oh, 1 year older? Okay, cool.
Everyone always had the impression I was older because I had a bald
Mature.
haircut. Well, I had a bald haircut, right?
Yeah.
I shaved my head, and I did it on purpose. I wanted to look older,
Mhm.
because I thought it would be make it more likely that I could get a job,
Mhm.
right? People don't take you seriously when you're 15, 16. They think you're naive, you don't know much. So I tried to kind of battle that. Miko and Mide, they cut my hair in the sixth wing common room.
Not me, the other one. He's doing fitness and stuff. I followed
Miko's
him
doing
recently.
fitness, so he's getting married. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
See,
Congratulations.
time flies.
What about you? You getting married soon?
Not anytime soon. Not anytime soon. I'm married to space for now.
How long has the idea of space been in your head? Were you always planning to just go to university and just pursue like an economics and finance kind of field, or how did it go?
Well, yeah. At the time, I mean, when I was in sixth form, I was actually working on another business. That inevitably failed. I had a lack of experience.
What was that business?
So the idea was, it was a company called Deba. The idea was that you could aggregate information from various different source points and then use that to create reports or even sort of funnel information into your dissertation. The whole hassle of writing essays and eventually my dissertation. And I wanted to kind of sort of preemptively create something that could help me support that. And I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, being young, not doing this for the first time, there are a lot of pitfalls you fall into. Hiring friends was my first one. I think the expectations can be misaligned on either side. But I think knowing that I need a sort of a safety net, decided to obviously go to university and study economics and management studies. And I wanted to balance the theoretical side of economics with the managerial side of management studies. I think having studied organizations at that point and sort of thinking about career prospects and where I might go if this business didn't work out, I think it was pretty clear that people who succeed on technical skills alone will sort of hit a glass ceiling. You go into an organization, you prove yourself, you're required to report to your managers, and then you get to a certain point. And at that point, usually your ability to progress is driven by your relationships with other people and your capacity to lead, as opposed to how technically savvy you are at your own job. Equally, if people like you, but I don't feel like you can sort of pull your weight at a more junior level, you never get to that place in the first place at all. So, coupling economics and management studies, I thought might give me the best chance of progressing quite quickly in a bank or some other financial institution.
Was it always a kind of dream to kind of work for a bank or anything like that?
No. I mean,
was there like an expectation from your parents as well, maybe to even get into finance?
No. I mean, I've always been like, I've always been creative. I've always had like an eclectic personality. So, what I've wanted to be has changed several times. I mean, I found my primary school notes the other day, and that was I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be a musician.
Well,
what you want to be, and I think the passions you have are not single fold, right? You will be interested in several things during the course of your life, but I think at some point you have to choose to focus. I did want to be an architect. I did take that seriously, but I did do well in maths, and I did well in sciences as well to support that. So I decided to orient my focus towards finance. Wall Street Money Never Sleeps with Michael Douglas.
The 1980 one.
Exactly.
I watched on the plane back.
And that kind of got me, a little pumped up.
That's a solid film.
That
That's a wicked.
It got me a little pumped up. So, decided to go into finance and had a pretty successful short stint before deciding to start Space, which was my second business.
Then I saw you work for Barclays, I think wealth management, or then Rothschild.
Yeah,
something like
so
that.
we did. I was an intern at Deutsche Bank to start with, then went into wealth at Barclays, then left with the same team to Rothschild to work in private equity there, and it was there that two of my clients funded the business. We raised
Over
about
200,000, I remember.
about $500,000
Oh, nice.
in the first year.
I remember being at the train station, and I'm pretty sure I contributed £100. I think I was at Henderson, I was at Golders Green Station, I was trying to log into Cedars, and I remember standing at the station, I was like, let me contribute to this.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why
It's so cool because I feel like, I think part of the reason I wanted to do it, go through crowdfunding was, even though we had a core set of investors who I already had very personal relationships with by virtue of them being my clients, Cedars sort of helped overcome like the paperwork barrier.
Mhm.
They deal with all the administration, all the periodic reports we have to deliver to our investors go through Cedars. So it was just an easy avenue to get things out. But a kind of like ancillary benefit was that everyone who invested, these other people who put in the tens and the £50 became evangelists for the business, even if only they contributed up to say 10-15% of the total raised amount. They collectively are probably making more noise than some of our the wider, larger investors who led them around. So, I had the idea for Space at university. I was a student ambassador, right? So my job at school was to take students from property to property. Every day I had to go and look at all the international students. Across the course of my journey, I just realized how consistent the issues that students were facing. And you would get students come from Nigeria, from America, from India, China, the Middle East, wherever it might be, and other parts of Europe to the UK, and have to lodge in really expensive temporary accommodation. You could be in like a hostel or a hotel for 3 months. It was crazy, the amount these guys were spending. And because they didn't have like a platform in their own home country, it was difficult for them to search for different options. If for anyone who's done a year abroad or for who's worked abroad, that it's very, you often have to go to the country in which you're working or studying before you can find a property. And that, in a world of technology, that just shouldn't be the case. I think at the time, I don't think I was ready to start another business. My first business had failed, and I swore I'd never start another business again. I was going to be a banker through and through, did very well. Within 3 years of being in finance, was at Rothschild, was an senior associate there, and then decided to just take a punt and leave, raising money from some of my
So after
clients.
that first business, what got you to think like, I just don't want to try this again? Was it the failure that hurt you or disappoint you that much? Or you were like, or you just felt like maybe I'm not a businessman, maybe I'm just better to
I always knew I was entrepreneurial, but I think the issue is that I had attached so much of my identity to it. So when the business failed, I kind of lost sense of myself for a second. It was like, well, if I don't have the business and I'm this ambitious person who's got all these aspirations, but yet can't make this work, then what do I have left? And that was tough for me. I think after that, I spent time investing in me outside of my business, such that, God forbid, if my business ever did fail, I could continue to live and have my own identity.
Because you developed yourself.
Because I'm a developed human being myself, irrespective of what I achieve. And carrying that into Space, I think, has made me a more successful entrepreneur. Because what I come to realize is that people, yes, as much as business is important, the viability of your business from an investability perspective, from profitability perspective is important. People want to invest in people that they like, who are developed, that they can sit down and have a drink with, or whatever else it might be. And I didn't really understand the value of that until I think I got a bit older. So Space is we're now a software company. We're a real estate oriented software business.
And what were you before?
A marketplace. And I'll explain how we went from sort of A to B. So when we first launched Space, we, leveraging kind of my experience and the problems that I noticed during my time at uni, we decided to start this sort of Airbnb style property rental marketplace that connects students with the whole plethora of different landlords that exist on the real estate spectrum. So on one side of that spectrum, you'll have everyday students, and if you're talking about the property landscape and that spectrum, On one side of that spectrum, you'll have private landlords. These will be your everyday sort of mom and pop style landlords who may or may not use an Airbnb for short-term lets, but don't necessarily have an equivalent for like a proper long-term rental, which requires sort of contract signing and recurring payments. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the institutional landlords. These are the likes of sort of Colliers and Hines, the big institutional corporate developers who already have like those processes in place, but still, for the most part, need verified leads from one central, credible place. Right now, these guys are spending a fortune on like Spare Room and tons of different platforms, none of which give them verified leads, and most of which require an upfront capital cost. So, if you're spending a few £1,000s on one platform that's only filling up 5% of your rooms, and you're listed on 20 different platforms, the money starts to back up, right? And so the thesis was that if we could become that one central marketplace by focusing on the niche of students, that these guys wouldn't have to go anywhere else. And we launched the product. We raised over $500,000 in 2017. That was successful. I created a real world-class team, and in November 2017 we launched the platform. And although we felt we built the best product in the market at the time, I think what struggled were the sort of unit economics of our underlying business. Most marketplaces globally are incredibly unprofitable. I mean, Uber, by the way, still is unprofitable. Airbnb started making a profit a few years ago, and that's having had a lot of money as investment.
And they're still even raising more money.
And they're still raising more money, right? So, they're doing that with the luxury of having a business model which accommodates users for a lifetime. Once you join Airbnb, there's nothing restricting you by virtue of being a student or whatever it might be from using the platform indefinitely. So you can imagine, therefore, how difficult it would be for a marketplace like Space to achieve profitability when you reduce that lifetime value to the 2 or 3 years that they're living off campus. It was impossible, right? And it's made even more impossible by the fact that students are notoriously non-sticky customers. They have no loyalty to anybody. Don't give a shit about anybody. I mean, and they're very expensive to acquire.
What made you realize this? Obviously at the start.
Well, just looking at how much we were spending in marketing, right? So we tested it over the first 6 months. How much are we spending in marketing? How many users are we getting in? What's the sort of CAC to LTV? We did all those metrics, and a year later, the company was in some trouble, quite frankly. I needed something to validate these assumptions. So we had the good fortune of being able to join the Colliers Techstars program at the time. Colliers, it was the inaugural PropTech program. Colliers is Techstars rather is an accelerator program. For those who don't know, they run incubators. I think they're second or third largest globally. Y Combinator is another large one, and Airbnb participated on the Y Combinator program in 2008. So for Techstars to launch an equivalent program but focused solely on PropTech was really interesting. The program was sponsored by Colliers that I had mentioned, and they at the time, that same year, had just bought a company called Harrison Street, it was a $2 billion acquisition, and they are the second largest provider of student accommodation globally. So what we were able to do by joining the program was able to leverage Harrison Street's data to validate some of our assumptions about how expensive it was to put students into a property. And then we decided to execute a pivot, which was very painful. I think it was, I had moved to Canada for 4 or 5 months to work on growing our existing product, and then sort of looking at, how this whole thing was going to work, and then we had to pivot. So the work that we'd done for the last 18 months, not that we had to tear it down because we could retain the product fine, but we had to really think about other marketing channels that we could use. And where we ended up was we began licensing the software to organizations who had cheaper and better recurring access to end user groups, students and landlords. The most obvious ones would be universities themselves, right? If we could equip the universities with the tools that they needed to essentially compete with the Spare Rooms of the world, then in fact, the students definitely wouldn't have to go anywhere else. And we know that because if you look at the first year market, the universities essentially have a monopoly. When you go to university, it's seen as a rite of passage to go into your first year halls of residence without complaint. And then only when the university doesn't have a service to offer do you then venture off into the wilderness and try to find something of your own. So the question, I think our thesis was, is if we could give the university the same tools to own the off-campus market in the way that they do the on-campus market, the students would just flow from one model of universities to the other. February 2019, this is sort of March 2019, 3 months after getting back from Toronto, we had the good fortune of acquiring the University of London and all of its constituent schools.
Oh, nice.
The University of London is a federation. It's not just a university. It consists of some of the more notable schools: London Business School, UCL, King's College, LSE, the University of the Arts, and all of their constituent schools. And collectively, I think it's 32 schools in total, and those schools represent, or make up rather, about 25% of the total number of higher education institutions in the country. Those 25% of institutions represent about 12.5% of the student population in the country. So it was a huge validating success for our pivot and for the business. And I mean, overnight, what seemed, we managed to acquire 25% of the market, or 12.5% if you think about it in student population terms. We started working with them, at that time, first of all, consultative phase, which was about 6 months. For anyone who's dealing with sort of bigger corporate clients, you know that the procurement process takes 6 to 12 months. It's quite long. And then we went into implementation. We've been building the product for them since September last year. They helped us refine our product. I think one of the main things I realized was that all entrepreneurs, one of the biggest failings I had, I think, as an entrepreneur, but also the biggest lesson, was that all entrepreneurs who think they have great ideas have only validated that assumption within their own mind. And really, the only people who can tell you whether a product is necessary or going to be successful or not is the consumer, the market. So we thought that we could sell to the students, and when the students said, we don't need you because actually we have a spare room, but we would only use this if it was sort of distributed by university, we ought to listen. And when the university said, we need this because our housing office is paying millions of pounds reconciling bad student experiences, which they're having on these third-party platforms over which they have no control, we had to listen. Even once we got into the contract, it was so interesting to see how the client steered the way our product moved in ways that we didn't realize it had to. And that's the real moat, that's the real barrier to entry is what came after, not signing the deal and all that kind of stuff. The real moat is what those universities have helped us create since we signed them on. Because there are legalities to this whole thing that a lot of those new startup companies will have no fucking idea about, quite frankly. And that's where the real kind of competitive advantage is for us. These corporate clients will sign you for 5 to 10 years. Their churn cycles in most cases 20 years. So being in the game and being in our position is hugely advantageous. And we're launching actually the platform to their students next week.
Oh, nice.
Next week. So in like a few days, after 18 months.
And now we fast forward to 2020, and how's the last 6 months been? Obviously with COVID, universities kind of essentially being shut, a lot of universities saying they kind of let students learn from home, work from home.
Well, I think there were a couple of things. I mean, when people say COVID, everyone gets scared, but let's be honest, COVID has been beneficial for some companies. Not that it necessarily has been hugely advantageous for space, but it hasn't necessarily had the negative impact some would expect. I think there are 3 trenches that you could fall in. Either it's business as usual, all universities are taking their students back into school, nothing's changed. You have everyone studying online, and then you have the halfway house. And for most universities, the first and the second option aren't really viable. The first is really not viable because if the number of contractions of coronavirus goes up, shooting up at universities, because the universities haven't taken any protocols in place, then they're to blame, and that's hugely bears a huge kind of reputational risk to the schools. So they choose not to do it, right? The second option is not viable because although it's the safest option, online courses usually warrant about 25% of the price of in-person studying. So the university is essentially saying, we're happy to give up, by going down that route, they're saying that they're happy to give up 70, 75%, 80% of their revenue, most of which is derived from courses, and real estate, of course, housing thereafter, for this next academic year, or maybe even back for the academic year after that if we don't find a vaccine soon enough. So what most schools are doing is finding the halfway house, right? And I think the problem's exacerbated by the fact that some courses like medicine, where you have to do like in-person labs and stuff like that, physically can't be done online. It can't be done online. So most universities are going down the halfway house route, which I thought will have you guys do half of your studying in person, half of it online. And the reason why that still requires a housing for demand is because most people have to be on campus to do the in-person stuff. And even for the courses, the part of the course which is done online, it's done in real time, meaning that you have to be online to study at the time at which the lecture in this country is starting. Meaning if you are in China and you are, I don't know, however many hours ahead or behind, you may have to be up at 3 a.m. in the morning
to be able to
participate on a real-time basis. So a lot of those kids are just like, well, screw that, I'd rather just be here in person to study. And therefore the demand for real estate still exists.
Okay, that's good.
Which is good for companies like us, which are creating software to manage that real estate.
What have you learned most about yourself 3 years into a well-developed business?
I think I've learned a lot. I've learned, my intolerances, my own temperament. I've learned what my boundaries are. That's probably the most important thing, I would say. When I first started, when I created my first business, and even I think in the early days of Space, I had no boundaries whatsoever. None. And not only that, I expected my team to not have any boundaries. If I'm up at 3 in the morning, well, why the hell aren't you up at 3 in the morning? I mean, come on, guys. And for a while, they actually bought it. They people were up till 3, 4 in the morning with me. Until, you get some bit of resistance, and people are like, well, I just can't do this anymore. I think part of the, my learning is understanding my own thresholds, my own tolerances, my own boundaries, and then creating an environment and a work-life balance. I wouldn't say balance, but work-life synergy that supports what I know my body is physically capable of.
What's your kind of day-to-day routine? I mean, do you have do you kind of go with the flow and have like a bit of a structure to the day, like depending on what time you wake up, or do you have like a whole regiment that you stuck to?
So I used to have no routine whatsoever. It's awful. I mean, I would go to bed at 4, be up at 9, have calls and take a nap in between. It was just all over the place. Today I get a minimum of 8 hours sleep a day, mandatory. I refuse. I don't. It's the idea.
What got you to finally decide that you want that 8 hours sleep?
I got back from textiles and I was exhausted, and I was trying to. I was getting 5 hours sleep a day. You get into the office, you're working at 8. You have to be there at 8. Program. Every day starts at 8. You leave it at 8. Then you go out. You're trying to socialize. I was trying to connect with some of the guys from Colliers at the time, and in the real estate business, that it's they like to drink. It's just it's a bit like kind of banking in the olden days. I think real estate probably hasn't followed suit as quickly in terms of reducing that. But it's very hyper masculine. Guys like to drink. The whiskeys are out. Even though my focus was on work, I would have to work till 8, 9, 10. Then go and see some of these guys, try and set up calls. I was also running the business in the UK, which was still at that time a marketplace, because yes, the pivot happened in a couple months after, but for those 3 months we were on the program, the marketplace was still running. So imagine you're running a UK business, which is sort of like 5 hours ahead, and then so I'd have to be up early just to take inquiries in the UK as well, so I couldn't get much sleep. I just can't do that anymore. 8 hours sleep a day. I work out every other day. I do mixed martial arts. I love to fight.
I remember in CCF, remember that little gym we had? I think you were wrestling with someone. I think it was Danis, we put some mats down.
Oh yeah, me and Danis. Danis he's a tough motherfucker. I'm being in an old boys school. Right?
Oh, that testosterone is high.
Testosterone is just all over. Keep fit, working out. I take vitamins every morning. You know, even just basic things like skincare. You know, I get up because people forget how important it is. I mean, when you don't sleep, you're not drinking enough water. I looked a mess. Even skincare, I refuse. I wash my face twice a day. I use specialist creams. I eat right. I drink a hell of a lot of water. I don't drink alcohol that much. I don't smoke. You know, and that's what I need to sustain. You know what I do. Especially when I was at uni, I felt like I was invincible. And you know, I could just go out and, you know, you have the odd day of going out and then we'll go straight from the club to your lectures, and you think that you can continue that for the rest of your life, and it just doesn't work that way.
You seem like a family man. I mean, I've known you for a few years, but I mean, we haven't spent a tremendous amount of time together, but I can just tell from the conversation, the energy, you seem like a family man.
I love my family. Again, I'm going to reiterate the point that I made before, which is you know, if you're working a full-time job, it's easier to have work-life balance. As an entrepreneur, I don't necessarily believe in that. I believe in work-life synergy. Because, you know, I don't necessarily have to have equal amounts of work and fun and pleasure. But what I do need to have is I need to allow one of those things to feed into the other in a way that's contradict or conflict each other.
Okay.
So like, because you will have times as an entrepreneur, quite frankly, where you are working, you need to work, you know, you're on a project, you're getting less sleep. But then you need to be able to sort of have a lifestyle that supports you in doing that. So it's not 50-50, but the 20% you are spending having fun needs to work into feeding into fueling the work life, and then vice versa. There'll be times where you quite literally think the business is working for itself and you don't have things as much to do. So you say, okay, well, how do I manage my relationship with work in a way that allows me to spend more time with family or whatever? And it will fluctuate like that. It's more volatile. Mm. And that's, obviously, if you take the average of it all, it probably works out as 50-50, but in any one
you didn't approach it like that. You didn't approach it
exactly. But at any one given point in time, there's one more than the other, and then you figure out, you know, if I take the average hours I spend on either over the course of the year, it might be 50-50, right? But you know, I think with a full-time job, you probably have 50-50 every day.
Mm. Interesting. Well, not work-life balance, work-life synergy. Friends. This is another topic I've always thought about, and okay. The kind of people you surround yourself with. Mm. If you rewind it back to when your first business, I mean, what have you learned most about the people you've been around? Do you still, have you, not like got rid of friends, but have you just like been able to move on from people but just haven't been on the same wavelength as you, and how have you dealt with that and managed that?
It's quite interesting because when I first, I think even forget before like space, I mean, even just going into finance, I did have that sort of mentality, you know, well, you know, if this guy is not with finance as well, you know.
Why'd you cut him off?
Yeah, you know, if he's not moving, then. But, you know, and group your friends away from associates. Because those people who commercially aren't as wealthy, okay, don't necessarily have all the glamorous jobs, are the ones I, in many cases, are most happiest with. I have friends who make half the pay as some of my colleagues, my ex-colleagues. I would rather spend my weekend with those guys than some of my ex-colleagues any day. I think what I've learned, part of what my journey as an entrepreneur has taught me, is that as much as I want to be successful and I want these things, that I will never give up those things at the cost of my humanity, ever. I don't necessarily think that one compromises the other. I think, again, they synergize, they synergistically feed into each other. If I'm around people who only think about success, wealth, money, all times of the day, your life will be miserable. Sometimes I just want to be with my boys who don't give a shit, who just want to have fun, who are cool, and I know that I appreciate them for who they are and what they can offer me, and vice versa. And then when I need to go to work, I know who to gravitate towards it, but I don't think it's
I'm gonna
right.
cut you out, but you just like
Nah, if that person, of course, if that person
is toxic and not helping,
your life, even in a kind of non-professional, purely social way, even within your social life, they're toxic, then fine.
Yeah, gotta do it. Yeah.
Gotta do it, right? But there are some people who just aren't driven and don't have the same motivations that I might have, and that's okay. I still love and appreciate these people for who they are, and I enjoy their time.
Do you have someone or a role model or a massive influence you've had your whole life, or when you were younger, that got you maybe to think more techie? Because obviously you were in the finance kind of world, but then you transitioned into tech. Have you had?
I don't think I can't put one name to it. I think I've met various people across the course of my journey.
You've picked strengths up.
Who I've picked different things from, people who I was on the program with, clients even, friends who I've reached back out to or reached out to me and I've reconnected with, and whom I've come to appreciate more than I ever have. Family, the time that I've given myself to spend with family and things like that. I'm just a better and happier person than I ever was in finance.
What kind of advice would you give to your younger self, or even you've got a younger brother as well, don't you?
My younger brothers, again, they don't necessarily have the same motivations as I am. Very smart. I'd say academically, my younger brother's probably smartest in the house. But he's more of an academic than he's an entrepreneur.
Just naturally.
Naturally. He's naturally smart, he's gifted, there's no doubt. Because I think for me, I did well academically, but I had to really go out for it. I'm smart, but I think my intelligence is not necessarily academic. I read a lot of books. It's a bit more eclectic than his is. So would I expect Daniel to become an entrepreneur? No. I think what I could probably advise him on is how he balances his aspirations in his own line of work with what's really important, which again is family and all that other good stuff, right? I think some of those lessons are transferable to what he's doing. Some maybe not. Everyone's journey is personal. Maybe
just to wrap it up a little bit, if you met someone that's planning on becoming an entrepreneur or start their own idea, if you had to give like 3 little ideas or maybe even one little bit of advice you would give them?
The first thing I would ask is question why you do what you do and make sure that it's authentic to yourself. Don't try to be a version of yourself that you're not, because you will fail. And even if you succeed as that person, you'll be unhappy, naturally. The only way that I think you can win in life is if you are, one, successful, but if you're happy with what you've become out of that success. And I think people, look at the monetary, shiny stuff and think that that's all there is, but there's much more than that to consider. The second thing is, I think, you have to go play the long game. It is a journey, and resilience with that in mind is perhaps the most important skill that you can pick up. A lot of people give up on the way. Of the 10 competitors that we put on our Seeders campaign when we were raising our first, $500,000 round in 2017, 90% of them are under the ground. They're in the fucking soil, dead. Most of those founders would have gone back into jobs. You have to recognize the actual gravity of the journey that you are about to embark on, and be willing to make the sacrifices that are required to make it work, because it's I think business is hard work.
That's what I realized as well through tough times. Everything, I'll say 99% of life is mental. It's what you tell yourself. Focus on the goal at hand. Yeah. And there will be up and downs. You're battling yourself at the end of the day. You'll have people who disagree with you. Even your family might not even believe in you as much as you believe in yourself. But
I agree.
That's where you need to stay focused.
Be positive. Look at the future. Go to the long game and do what feels authentically right to you. Because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. At the end of it, like, I say anything that really fucking matters. I'll tell you that.
So are you happy right now in life? If you had to, the thing with happiness, it's a wishy-washy word. Yeah, exactly. Well, if you had to rank the satisfaction of life at the moment where you are, would you say, yeah, it's good?
It's high, and I think the way I put it is, because I remember saying to a friend, happiness is important. His response to me was, well, you're never always happy. And I said, well, look, you can look at life 2 ways, right? You either are miserable, and then you have like the kind of peaks of happiness, and you go back to the trough of like misery, or you're a happy person most of the time. And then you have the kind of troughs of, disappointment, upset, but you always bounce back. And I prefer to look at life from the latter lens and the former, right? And that's how I feel. I feel great. Do I get pissed off when, people deliver on stuff like, yeah, I get angry.
Bullshit, it's natural.
Natural. I get pissed off. Things happen. I shout. I scream. But then I deal with it, and I'm back to my normal self.
What you said in 2 weeks or a few weeks time? Spaces.
Well, in a few days, I think you can check us out on our website. It's www.liveinspace.com. The pivot's finally complete. We've launched the University of London's product, and we're demoing with several others, and not just here, but across North America now. Having brought some of the directors from the University of London onto our board of directors, so they're helping us drive those sales. It's pretty good. Check us out.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Leon.
Alrighty.
My God.